Start off with straight and level. So straight meaning a constant heading, level meaning constant altitude. Cruise power in this airplane is 2200 RPM, giving me about 75 miles an hour. I'm trying to hold 1500 feet. So how do I do that? Starts with the power setting, 2200 in this case. And as I fly, if I see myself climbing, I'll lower the nose first with the elevator, and then I will re-trim it so the nose stays down, and there's no pressure on the stick. I can let go of the stick, it'll stay at that altitude. So that's the pitch altitude side of it. On the straight part, basically holding your wings level when you're at cruise power, because the tail of the airplane is mounted on a slight angle to counteract for the prop, left turning tendencies from the prop, and it should, if it's a properly rigged airplane, it should just go straight as long as you keep your wings level. So that is straight and level. And straight and level is important because it's how you begin and end pretty much every maneuver. All right, now if we were in slow flight and we were trying to maintain 1500, I already sink in here, we'd have a lot of power in order to maintain that altitude. That's going to give us a lot of left turning tendency because of the angle of attack. The tail will not, the way the tail is slightly mounted off center will not be enough. So if I let my feet off the pedals right now, you can see how much the nose is yawing to the left because we have power on to maintain altitude as during slow flight. Back to cruise flight. There's cruise power, cruise speed, altitude is constant. I want to transition into a climb, so I'm going to use my mantra, pitch, power. If I don't use any rudder, you'll see the nose begin to wander a little bit to the left. I'll need a rudder to hold the heading, and then retrim for whatever speed I want to climb at. You have a couple of options. You can have like a cruise climb, like I'm doing about 60. You could have VY, which is closer to 55 or so, VX, which is probably way down in the low 40s. Whatever speed you're trying to shoot for. And then to level off, pitch. On a high wing airplane, you can just set the bottom of the wing to level. That's about right. Power. When you get to the airspeed that you want, in this case about 75, that's the power setting that you want, 2200. Alright, go into a descent. Everything's on. Did the power first on that one, but it's pitch, power. The nose, if I let my feet off the pedals, will go to the right. Get track into the right. So I need a little bit of left rudder in order to maintain my heading. So rudder. Trim, in this case, it's going faster than my cruise trim speed, so I'd actually have to trim nose up. To level off, pitch. Power, releasing that left rudder, and trim. I'm going to put the carbine back to cold. You can accomplish a turn in an airplane without using any rudder successfully. If I wanted to turn from Mount Rainier to the mountains off my left with no rudder whatsoever, I could easily do it. I just have to bank the wings and then pull the nose around. The reason why the airplane is turning is the lift generated from the wings is pulling it to this side. If I roll out, it's a little floppy, but it works. But the tail on the airplane, once the wings begin to pull the airplane to the side, the air is going to hit the side of that tail, and the tail is going to swing around just because of the stability of the airplane. It's kind of like a big arrow with tail feathers on it. So again, I can successfully turn the airplane to Mount Rainier. Let's try it here with no rudder whatsoever. So I'll bang, pull, and roll out. But when I try to roll out on Mount Rainier, the nose is going to swing past it and then come back with no rudder whatsoever. Now if I repeat that with rudder, I'm using aileron and rudder together. This is at cruise power, a little bit of a higher power setting here, a little faster than cruise speed. So I don't need a ton of rudder. Aileron and rudder together. Once I've established the bank, they're both neutralized. Aileron and rudder are neutralized. It's just the elevator to turn the airplane. When I roll out, aileron and rudder together. Now if I wanted to do that more aggressively and use full aileron, I would need more rudder. Here we go, full aileron is going to need more rudder. But it's not all of the rudder, because I'm going so fast. Now if I was going slow, I would need a lot more rudder per unit of, per unit of aileron deflection. That's the relationship. Okay, so now I'm going slow. If I want to use full aileron, I might need full rudder. I'm not even sure if I'll have enough rudder. 45 miles an hour. Definitely need more. A good way to do this is demonstrate this is with the Dutch roll maneuver. So I'll do a Dutch roll at slow flight, no rudder. We'll see what happens. It's very dramatic, very dramatic. All right, I'll do that same maneuver at cruise speed. $75 miles an hour. Okay, so the Dutch roll maneuver, no rudder at cruise speed. I got no rudder, my feet are on the floor. It's still sloshing about, but it's nowhere near as much as when it's in slow flight. So the thing that we have to understand is that the amount of drag created by the aileron increases the higher the angle of attack. So for any given amount of aileron deflection, you won't always need the same amount of rudder deflection. It really depends on your angle of attack or your speed. So if you're at high speed, you're at low angle of attack, it doesn't take a ton of rudder when you're putting the aileron into begin or into turn. But when you're in slow flight, or say you're at a medium to slow speed like in the pattern, it's going to take a bit more rudder to keep it coordinated. A better maneuver than the Dutch roll is slalom turns. What I don't like about a Dutch roll is that you're not actually coordinated if your nose is staying right on a point. Because there's only two things that we know about coordination. When you're not banked, you should not be turning. And when you are banked, you should be turning. So the Dutch roll, the traditional Dutch roll maneuver, you try to hold your nose on a point on the horizon while rocking your wings left and right. Well, you won't actually be coordinated if you're doing that, because when you begin to bank, you should also begin to turn. So the slalom turn is a better maneuver. What you do is you pick 2 points about 30 degrees apart. I'm going to use the notch in that hill over there and this ridge, and you turn back and forth between them. So I'm going to clear the area to my left here, and I'm going to begin by banking, and as soon as I begin to bank, my nose can turn. I don't have to worry about staying on that point. And I want to lead it a little bit so that as I'm decreasing my bank, my nose stops turning. And it stops right at the moment that my wings get to wings level. Okay, I'm going to turn back to the ridge. Area is clear. So as soon as I begin to turn, or as soon as I begin to bank, I can begin to turn. I don't have to worry about holding that heading. And I can lead, and as I decrease my bank, I can decrease my turn rate, try to match it just right. So the slalom turn is actually a better maneuver. Back to the ridge. So while I'm in the turn, I'm just pulling. The ailerons and rudder are neutral. It's just elevator. When I roll out, if I do it just right, as my wings reach wings level, my nose will stop and my heading will be constant. I could let go and the nose isn't going to swing left or right. One of the things I used to do as a flight instructor when teaching climbs, specifically climbs, and trying to get students to understand prop yaw, because prop yaw is a bit of a challenge. The fact that there are 2 lefts and 2 rights in an airplane is a bit of a challenge. It's very confusing. I would divide the controls up. So the stick is generally pretty easy to understand. The only thing that people make a mistake with when it comes to the stick or the ailerons is, let's say they're in a climb, and the nose is trying to go to the left. I take my feet off the pedals. I'm going to put a lot of power in here so that it's more obvious. So the nose is trying to go to the left, and the students will oftentimes use the aileron, and they'll get themselves in a bank, and then they'll just find themselves climbing out in a slip like this, right wing low in an American airplane. And to get the students to learn not to do that, I just take the aileron away from them. Okay, I'll take the aileron, we're going to go into a climb, and I'll just keep the wings level. And then they just have the rudder. So then they don't even have the option to use the wrong control. The only control that's available to them is the rudder. And they have to essentially carve these new neural pathways in, unless they've been operating an old Caterpillar bulldozer with clutch brakes. They've probably never operated a machine with 2 options for left and 2 options for right. So the neural pathways always go back to the hand. You always have a wheel, steering wheel, or a tiller in any kind of boat or car. And it takes a while to carve those new neural pathways in for the rudder to go left and right with the feet. Speaking of the rudder, there's 3 times that we use the rudder, 3 things that we use the rudder for. We use it for turning while we're taxiing. All of our turning left and right is done with the rudder. We use it to trim away the prop yaw anytime we're in slow flight or high angle of attack with high power, or when we're descending. We're accounting for the fact that tail's mounted on an angle, so we're trimming away that prop yaw, and we use it to trim away the aileron track and to actually get the airplane to start turning and stop turning at the beginning of turns. So if I roll into a turn, I'm going to use the rudder to get the nose to start turning and to trim away that drag and keep the airplane coordinated. If I had a ball, it'd keep the ball centered. I don't have a ball. So here we go. I'll turn to the left. Area is clear. The rudder gets the airplane to start turning right away. Once the turn has begun, the rudder and aileron are neutral. The rudder helps the nose stop turning as the wings are banked to 0. Clear to the right. Rudder helps the nose to begin turning in the correct direction. Once we're in the bank, the aileron and rudder are neutralized, just pulling with elevator through the turn. And to roll out, the rudder helps the nose stop turning, ideally right at the moment that the wings bank reach 0. So the turn stops right when the wings bank to 0. And the rudder is used to deal with prop yaw or the design of the airplane to account for prop yaw. So it all comes back to prop yaw. Now, talking about prop yaw, there are 4 things that cause prop yaw. We normally just say P factor. That's one of them. There's also spiral slipstream. Spiral slipstream at very low airspeed can actually be pretty dramatic. Torque. When you have a lot of torque, I think that was kind of messing with my stalls to the right earlier. I had to have a lot of aileron to account for, to fight the torque. And gyroscopic precession. Well, gyroscopic precession is only a factor when you're changing your pitch, and there's a resultant yaw reaction force. That's like when you're raising the tail on a tail airplane on takeoff, or when you're rotating a tricycle gear airplane on takeoff.